I do think that that's really important for people to know as they come into the Voicecraft fold too, though, that whole spectrum is there. Like you don't have to know the jargon, but also knowing the jargon is not a problem. There's a lot that you just said there that I would love to go down a pathway of talking about therapy, but I'm not going to because we're here to we're here to also talk about the Voicecraft context. So everything that you were just talking about there, about sort of this setting the conditions or finding your way, and these rather than trying to use your words necessarily or explicitly to set those terms, it's actually about the movement. And right, what is it for you that I mean, I'd love to know the actual story of what led up to you even engaging in Voicecraft, and we can do that in a second. But first of all, what is it that you about Voicecraft that you think relates to that idea, or that for you, your experience of that?
Excellent. The quick answer is that everything we're just describing about going into a conversation as making it something like a work of art, that is what I think Voicecraft does. And I don't actually think, there's a lot of, Toastmasters in the Jefferson Literary and Debating Society. We did an oration class, debating society. All that is not teaching that. That's the issue. There's actually some sort of conversational skill set or way to carry yourself in a conversation that is completely missing, that is modeled at Voicecraft. And I'm actually of the opinion that what is modeled at Voicecraft is basically what is completely necessary for the survival of democracy in a global pluralism or pluralistic relationships or human beings under mass complexity and psychological pressures. So basically, the model of Voicecraft is the way of conversation and engagement that in 2024 planet Earth is utterly necessary. And I don't think it's taught I don't think Toastmasters does it. I don't think I do associate Voicecraft with crafting the voice. There is a certain crafting of the voice. Well, and the great Hyrude mentioned this once, is there's something about this, there's a circling dialogos element of Voicecraft, but it also is about a particular subject. It's also about going into a depth, but not losing the people in their emotional centers and their personal selves in that engagement with the subject. But that's what good fiction does. And in my mind, that's what good philosophy should do. There's actually a way, or deep thought. The word we use for deep thought as a general category is philosophy. By philosophy, to anyone listening to this, we do not mean technical knowing the history of philosophy. It's that love of wisdom. And I think I really do like how D.C. Sindler describes it, because I think it's correct. Love of wisdom is the love of being gathered under something beyond you in a dance. So philosophy is the love of dance, if you will. Philosophy is this dancing. Love of Sophia, Lady Sophia, love, dance, gathering under this thing. I think it actually is a massive problem that philosophy is now a category of education, because when I say philosophy, it sounds like a specialist field. Yes. And at this point, we really don't have a better alternative word. You could say logos. Heck, I'm halfway ready to call it Voicecraft if we want, because there's something about good philosophy that is actually Voicecraft. Like, good philosophy is a mode of conversation, not just deep discussion. That's what we see modeled in the Platonic dialogues. In all the best philosophy, you cannot separate the ideas from the mode of conversation. No more good fiction that you can separate the structure and style of the prose from the story. These things are inseparable, and if you separate them, then you get pathologies. You get
this is therapy too, right? Like, I mean, I can't help it, but you can't separate the content from the process. And there's there's many ways in which I guess psychologists in particular get trained in a manner that is hyper focused on content. And loses so much of the richness of the procedural stuff and the process. And yes, we won't go. I will keep us. I will move back here. So I really love that answer. I'm tempted though to get. I'm tempted to get more of a sense. And this might sound very reductionistic, and it is. But anyway. What are the particular aspects then? Because I agree with the way that you're framing it. But if someone is trying to, from outside or is new to Voicecraft and is trying to think about, from your experience of taking part in these sessions and contributing, what is it? What are the particularities of what goes on in those sessions, though, that might be part of this larger experience that you're describing? What are the particularities? Um, is it that people are given the sort of space and people just like you know what I mean? What are the particularities that you think generate this experience more broadly?
Well, I'll describe it this way. Let's say we have a Voicecraft session about AI. I'll just use that because that's what's popular, right? All right. So you have AI, you have you, and you have the relation between you and AI. So there are three things that are actually going on when the subject of a conversation is AI. 99% of conversations about AI are going to leave out you and the relation and just talk about the AI.
Yes.
So it's going to be about the AI. Now, other conversations will be like, well, how are you feeling today? So there's no relation to AI, it's just about you. Another mistake actually can be if you're too meta, where you just talk about relation and not, right there.
Yes.
The kind of conversation I am of the strong opinion is an art form that is absolutely necessary on planet Earth 2024 is where you keep all three together at all times in the conversation. But of course you say, well, we're stuck in sequential brains. So how in the world do you keep three things together and it'd be intelligible, right? Well, there's a particular art form where you say, wait a minute, we've been talking about AI too long. We need to go back to us. How are we feeling in light of AI? Wait, we need to talk about what AI is making us think about, not just AI. Okay, we're losing sight of the technical details of AI. Oh, actually, what is the relation to us with AI, regardless if it manifests in the way we're talking about? Notice what you're doing. You're moving between all the different levels and the interplay between those levels for the sake of elucidating the trinity or the triplex of the three factors, you, relation, AI, right? That is reality is geometrical. Reality is not algebraic. Reality is not point. Reality is all three at the same time. And if you cannot describe all three at the same time, you will be alienated in the conversation by not knowing AI, or whatever you say about AI won't really apply to you because we're talking about AI, not you. So in order for it to not be alienating, but also productive, and also insightful, and also if we don't talk about AI at all, then AI is still in your world and you're overwhelmed by not understanding everything. So then you're going to close off and be like, I just don't want to think about it. Well, that's pathological. But then if we just talk about you, not in light of a world with AI, well, then we're setting you up to be fragile when AI comes around and you have to make decisions about it. So you have to do all three. Otherwise, you're setting people up to fail, basically, in different ways. But how to do all three, let me just describe one skill needed for that. You have to sense when you're going too far in one direction versus the other. Well, what?
Yep.
What's that? What's that skill? What's that skill of sensing? Okay. Sensing is basically, if we follow Aristotle on wisdom, and I was speaking to the great Thomas Jockin about this, sensing is necessarily experiential. So if I were to ask you when you're in therapy, don't you have a sense when the conversation is going X or Y way? If I were to say, well, write down on paper the proof of that sense, you would be like, no, that's not how this works. Well, that's how an artist is. When an artist knows that they need to structure the sentence X way versus Y way, and using certain words versus others, where does that sense come from? It comes from years of the craft. It's basically the only way to get it.
Right.
Oh, wait a minute. That means the skills of Voicecraft can only come from there being a continual community of Voicecraft in which people can gain the experience and have more and more people do it. Because if everything comes down to, and I think it basically does, the ability of human beings faced with complexity to keep all three, I'll just call it the triplex, if we use that for short.
Well, I was thinking of the tripartite. It's just
tripartite. Oh, that works.
Tripartite.
The tri. We'll call it the tricycle. How about the tricycle?
It's also amazing. I will just quickly say it's also amazing, even the brain, the way you're talking about that the brain is actually arranged in three levels as well. But anyway.
But this is the issue, is like literally our conversation structures do not reflect the actual image and likeness of the human being. So they're fundamentally alienating. Like that's the problem. Like the human brain operates geometrically, and yet most of what we encounter is not geometrically. So they're alienating. They leave something out. You have to make everything match the image and likeness isomorphically per se of everything else if it's going to be fitting. If you don't do that, then you leave something of the human out.
That's right.
And what you leave out can be a problem. So I think, and then I'll give it back to you. So this triplex that are tripartite or different things that would do, or tricycle or tri, maybe the tri, three, triangle. I'll call it the triangle. That's good. I can handle that word. Triangle. We'll call it the triangle. Basically, conversation requires the triangle to function in a global pluralistic world, 2024, of ever complexity. The only way you can do the triangle, at least one skill, is the sense we're describing. And the only way you do that is continual experiencing of the triangle in the effort to get better. And then you develop the sense. Well, then you need regular interactions like you see at Voicecraft. So to me, that's kind of the things the community brings up.
Yes. I was talking to Tom, and he was talking about it as like a tuning fork. Right. But we're going to call it the tuning triangle now.
Oh, yes. The tuning tri-tune. I'm going to call it the tri-tune.
Oh, no, yeah. Now that sounds like that needs to be like,
oh, that's actually it. The tri-tune. Oh my gosh. The tri-tune.
Something.
I'm going to use that.
Yes, the sensing and the tuning. It's because I guess I'm also hearing you talk about Voicecraft as facilitating integration, yes. Like it's and but in order to facilitate integration, sometimes people must first experience the fragmentation. Yes. They have to be aware that that's even occurring in order, and I think even that. So yes, the integration is important, but the sensing and the tuning that you were talking about, that's definitely, if we call it a skill, that's definitely a skill or an aspect of yourself that there's not a lot of other places to learn to start to tune into. And yes, I mean, in therapy, you can call it countertransference. In the kind of therapy I do, we give it a name. It's called the Unconscious Therapeutic Alliance. It's vital, and it's what's missing. So what I'm hearing from you is part of what you see is so richly experienced through Voicecraft is this I guess it's like a playground to some extent too, isn't it? It's like it's facilitating play in a way that is also allowing you to become more aware of your own sensing ability and to start to even tune your tuning. Tune, and in doing so is helping you to integrate these many levels, layers, like however you want to frame it. So Daniel, I guess more blandly, or blandly is not the right word, but more reductionistically, what are just the basic steps of how you came to Voicecraft? Because I don't even know that. When did you first take part in Voicecraft, and how did you find it? And what was that like for you, those first encounters?
Well, when I was lying under the rubble of my wrecked hot air balloon, and Tim Adlin pulled me out and said, I have a place for you. After my business went bankrupt,
Wow.
it really worked out. So it goes well. But no, if I was found under the rubble still alive of a hot air balloon, then if Tim Adlin found me and wrapped me in swaddling clothes and like brought me with him to Voicecraft, that would be the most beautiful thing. And I would tell that story on every opportunity I had.
Is that actually representative of something that happened though, or it's not? It's a wild.
That is an excellent question. So what happened is the great and fantastic Cadell Last invited me to be part of a Philosophy of Lack series, and he invited me, Tim Adlin, and Alex Ebert to be in this conversation because I had known Cadell for a bit and had worked with him and had gotten to know him. So we were invited to that. Fell in love with Tim, followed him over to Voicecraft, and here we are, all these years later. So it started with the 4 years, 2020, 19 maybe? I guess it was more like March 2020 or something like that. Okay. So I followed Tim over from the Philosophy of Lack series because I really appreciated to me, like I said, it was very, I felt that Voicecraft was indeed filling this, you could say need, this need of a way of speaking that no one else was doing. And to me, that was very precious and mattered. I mean, well, I'll just say like like on this idea, the other thing I'll say that has always stood out to me at Voicecraft is you have this tri-tuning, and also this awareness of that speaking is a big deal. Like the voice is like some sort of expression of some inner space that is very powerful. If you're going to speak, it matters. You know, sometimes in religion, they'll talk about a reverential fear. That's not anxious fear, but a certain sort of, this is a big deal. I think one of the things that has really gotten us in trouble is that we don't treat speaking with a kind of reverential fear, which is actually a good thing. The best, and I'll note this, the best artists treat creativity with a reverential fear. They know creativity can destroy your life. Like you know, the muse shows up one day and you're not ready for it. It might destroy you, actually, you know. And Voicecraft has an understanding that there's something about the voice we have to work with, but what we have to work with is dangerous. And the way we work with it is more like tri-tuning versus the structure that we're given. That means it has to be trained. So for me, there's a way in which you can associate it with almost like a religious ritual, which at its best form, which you could, you know, the artistic act is a religious ritual. And I don't see treating speaking at oration or speech clubs or a lot of places online, do not treat speaking as a kind of reverential act of great force and power, of which it is. And again, the more complex and the more ideas and the more connected we all are, the more this thing called voice gets unleashed upon the world. And if we don't treat it with the right respect in speaking, then it could be a force of great destruction. Just like all the best things can be. All the most wonderful things in life are also the things that, if mishandled, are the most destructive. Just like love and beauty and different things like that. So the Philosophy of Lack series is also relevant in the sense of, you know, and I've been doing work with Thomas Jockin and Javier on this idea that philosophy had lost the category of lack. In Aristotle, you have being and nothing, but there's a third category that I think is actually central for the metaphysics, which is lack. And by lack, what Aristotle means is a present absence, something that is here and not being here. So, for example, when I don't want a cup of coffee, it's nothing to me. But when I want a cup of coffee and it's not here, it's lacking. Because it's a present absence, right? So the argument is that actually most of human existence is a relation to lack, not merely being, not merely nothing, but lack. And most of the time we speak out of our lack, in insecurity of lack and for lack. And so the philosophy of lack for me leads directly to the question of voice, because very often voice is speaking to articulate or to manage lack. And if we do it pathologically, we end up in trouble. There's another way in Aristotle, and then I'll give it back to you, where lack is the opening of beauty. So if you hold it in the right way, the thing that is presently absent is transcendent. But then there's another form of lack of what is presently absent is the thing that you're avoiding, that you're trying not to talk about because you haven't faced that. So it's your source of anxiety. So lack, this is the funny thing. Lack metaphysically is both the source of anxiety, but it is also the source of the transcendent. It's the same metaphysical form. The transcendent is lacking, it's a present absence, but anxiety is also a present absence. So the question is, how do you hold or voice or manage the thing? And that's also where, for me, Voicecraft, if we take the metaphysics of lack seriously, now you also have to get into, not to put everyone to sleep, differences between like primary substance, first substance, partial objects, all these fun things. So I'm not saying that I'm not saying beauty and anxiety are equivalent. I'm saying that metaphysically, they are formally similar, and the tools by which we deal with them have a lot to do with voice and speaking and relations. So that's the space of learning how to have the right reverential tri-tuning by which we go about leaning more toward beauty than anxiety. But I give it back.
Yeah, how is that different to you from longing and desire? Like how
they're definitely connected. They're absolutely
you know,
connected.
like the through absence, you know, like
yes.
Anyway, that's probably a conversation for another time.
That's actually excellent though, because Thomas Jockin and that's what we just talked about a lot. Because like, so for example, it's the relation to the partial object. If I have a partial object, there's basically generally two ways I relate to it. I honor it as a partial object and know I need to actually keep it as a partial object so that it continues to be a source of desire that motivates me to know myself more so in light of the partial object. But then there's the partial object of, I'm going to make it full. I'm going to get that big other. I'm going to complete it, right? And that's when the partial object, same metaphysical form, but different relations to it, that one leads to a kind of honoring and reverence, the other leads to a pathology that ultimately leads to something self-effacement. So it absolutely has a lot to do with how we treat desire and longing, and that we see desire and longing as the conditions by which we can experience a partial object as beauty, as opposed to let our longing and desire controls us to a place of opening Pandora's box, if you will, or doing something that's more self-effacing.
It's related to will, though. I know that's a very fraught word.
Sure.
But yes, sort of a with yes. And it's also related to a rejection. So, you know, a rejection of the being with it as it is.
Absolutely.
In order to, yes, but yes, there's so much I could say there. What you're talking about with the voicecraft context and what did you call it? The reverential fear of voice. And that I mean, I don't know that you said it so much in these terms, but what I was thinking as you were talking is it sounds a bit like the voice should be taken seriously, and the manner in which one uses it should be taken very seriously. But through just becoming aware of that, one may be paralyzed through fear. And so to have a forum or a context in which one can go and actually lean into spontaneity as well, sometimes first as the entry point, to therefore start to play. It's like the playground. With and obviously to do that, to go to be spontaneous with your speech, your voice, in a manner that is intending to tune it over time, or help to somehow over time tune your sense, your inner sense of I don't know what of value, of meaning. I don't know what it is, but you're essentially going there like a training ground. Well, you could be. It could be one reason why you're going there, like a training ground. I think this point's important. I'll tell you why. Because you know, for some people who listen to this, it may be that they are immensely aware of the fear of their voice already, and feel that they need to reach some sort of place already of knowing how to manage that before entering something like voicecraft, right? Before entering such conversations. But I think there's a distinction, I guess I'm trying to make here, between voicecraft sessions, as even though they are taken very seriously, I don't mean this to sound like they're not very serious matters, but there is a latitude there for some spontaneity and play. Like there is this flexibility, this breathing almost that goes on, this sort of like inhale and exhale that's always going on. And I think that is sort of contained, it's beautifully contained and maybe metabolized or something by the presence of everyone there, and also just the manner in which it's undertaken. I just say all this, I guess, to highlight that you can really be, in my mind anyway, and tell me what you think of this, you can really be sort of anywhere on that, if we want to call it a spectrum of, you know, where you are already in terms of feeling that you know how to do this well, or just further refinement, versus I've never really opened my mouth in any social setting. I feel there's something that I could be saying. I don't know how to do it. I'm very scared of saying the wrong thing. I wouldn't want that to, I guess, prohibit someone from feeling that this is still a forum or a context that they can engage with. And this does actually link to what I was talking with Tom about, in the same respect that, at least for me, I've experienced there's something about voicecraft that even though I'm anxious, less so now, but especially at the start, anxious in some of those sessions, there is a warmth and a care with which those conversations are held and your contributions are held. But it's not just a like a soothing comfort. It's also calling to you and drawing. It just somehow happens to meet you at the right point between like kindling the fire in a very gentle, kind of nuanced, human, really refined manner that feels caring and nurturing, at least maybe for me, maybe not for everyone, versus also you are kindling a fire. So it is actually helping to build something more powerful within you. So it feels like both, I guess, a powerful, I guess like a masculine force and a feminine force at once. It's that reverence for voice, but done through a really deep care and reverence for human relationship. And that actually links back to what you were talking about right at the start when you're talking about, you're someone who uses banter as sort of that door, that entry point, right? Or maybe and sometimes, not always, right? And that's the same thing as you described your reasoning behind that. I heard a person who is very very motivated by caring for the other, but caring for the possibility and potentiality of every relationship that you might encounter, and also a reverence for not knowing what could possibly be there, and trying to, like I said, like maximize almost what this could become by offering these options, but doing it in a really refined, kind of thoughtful manner, taking into account the comfort of the other person who's there. All these things that you were describing about banter actually in some roundabout way relate at least to part of what I experience in Voicecraft that has made it a place where I definitely feel that I could grow in my ability to do these sorts of things. Even as a therapist, like that's actually quite a separate construct. Like there's very little about my comfort in the therapy room that translates over to Voicecraft. It's very different. So this is supposed to really be more so focused on you than me, so that people can get a sense of you. But I sense you have a question or something. Do you want to share something?
So you were pointing out and getting at, I think, one of the most consequential mistakes of, dare I say, the modern world, that has actually led to all sorts of trouble. So first off, I will also note some people may hear the banting stuff and says that sounds very calculating. You're like calculating what's going to be said. Yeah. Well, you have to realize you have to do certain things to open horizons of possibility. And if you don't open horizons of possibility, well, then relation can't occur on a deeper way. So there is, like, the artist has to get the canvas. They have to get the paint. You say, well, they're calculating. They should just create. You have to till the soil. And one of the problems is people have actually, this is an example where they put intimacy first. They say, well, no, you shouldn't think anything. You should just be open to whatever occurs. And as a result, you don't get intimacy. Whereas if you put the creative act first, then the intimacy comes. You also pointed out how if you tell people a story about how your kids and you were picking up rocks, there's an intimacy in that. Exactly. The intimacy comes second to the story. Like, I'm not telling you, I love my kids. That's very forced. So that you
feel intimate with me.
Yes, I want you to be intimate.
Yes, that's right.
Instead, right. I show a scene that then, here's the key, because I'm inviting you in to interpret it, that very act is an invitation of intimacy, showing an intimacy, and I'm also trusting your capacity to interpret it. So there's relation all the way down in different ways. Now, there's a very interesting, there's a very interesting part in the New Testament where Jesus basically calls a child over, and the child sits on his knee and says, you got to be like this one if you're going to enter the kingdom of heaven. It's pretty odd. Now, it was probably a young girl, because in that civilization, young girls were the lowest on the totem pole. So there was probably the least will enter first going on there.
So there's a child on the knee and there's another child that gets called over.
No, Jesus calls a child over, and the story points to the religious leaders of the day, points to his followers, points at this child and says, you must become like this.
Got it.
And it's very odd. So very often I think we associate play and reverence as opposites. Like you don't play where you have reverence. In fact, the only way to properly address what you revere is through a mode of play, because otherwise you don't believe it frees you. Otherwise, you don't believe it's actually worthy of honor. Something that's worthy of honor actually liberates you. It allows you to be yourself and to be free. So if you treat the reverence with a certain stiff seriousness, there's actually a way in which that dishonors it, because you don't actually believe it has any power to liberate you. And so one of the most, there's this odd thing where it seems as if people who do creative acts, you could, not always, but generally, artists, stuff that seems irrelevant, pointless even. Some of those people seem to be the most developed. The ones who do these pointless things, they seem the most developed. So there's something about play, if you will, that without you cannot be a full human being. And if the full human being is what is worthy of reverence, that means you must play. That means, in fact, if you have reverential fear, you will play, because that's the only way to engage in it. Now, by reverential fear, I'm using a particular theological term. A better term might be reverence or respect. You don't have to use the word fear there. The irony as well is that the lack of reverence leads to anxiety. Like very often, if you don't know how to have reverential fear, then you're consumed by anxious fear, if you will. Reverence is it allows you to have a certain appreciation and honoring and know that there's something greater, and thus you're safe. When you don't revere anything that basically presents you as the most important thing, even if you don't mean to say that, well, then you know that you're not God. You know that you're fallible. So then you're really anxious. But reverence has a way of providing a certain psychological security and knowing that there actually is more than you. And there actually are relationships and there are things that you can participate in that help give you a certain sense of grounding. You don't have to control everything. If you are everything, then yes, you do have to control everything, which you cannot do unless you will be anxious. But the fun thing about play, what play teaches you is you can actually do something pointless and the world doesn't fall apart, actually. You can do something pointless and actually have a good time. Why was I taking things so seriously? Because you thought you were the most serious thing. What play does is suggest that there's something holding the world together that doesn't need your seriousness all the time, and therefore the world becomes more wonderful. It has more kind of substance to it. It has more sort of there-ness to it, and it's easier to get out of your head. Play gets you out of your head. You would think it's the opposite. You say, what do you mean? Play is imagination to get you in his head. No, play gets you out of your head. It's when you have to take everything seriously and kind of control it all, then all you're doing all day long is calculating how to make sure stuff doesn't screw up, right? Every word I say, every conversation becomes the recitation of the right words in a spell. Because if I say the wrong words, everything's going to blow up. You become a kind of constant conjurer of the right terms and the right way and the right activities, which then, of course, is very anxiety producing. But then at the same time, how do you balance with the seriousness of speaking? Well, you take seriously the seriousness of speaking by crafting it. You take an art seriously by learning the craft. You do not take it seriously by worrying about it. You take it seriously by working at it, which is the surrendering.
Right? It's the surrendering, right? This is the play of surrendering to it, in the belief that at least you might have fun. I mean, like if that's the only thing that comes out of it and it did end up being pointless, whatever, it was fun. But I actually think it's bigger than that. You do it because you are surrendering to the idea that through that process, it may reveal or provide you with something or a that you weren't aware of at the start. Like a point may actually come out of it on the other side. You just don't know what it is yet, and you might not be able to fathom what it is yet, right? And the concept of play as a kind of reverence, it's in a relationship you actually honor the potentiality and the possibility of the other person. If you can be playful with them, you don't treat them as some rigid construct through, that I must keep narrow and you must remain just within these contours for me because that's who you are to me and that's the only way I value you and that's the only way you should remain. Do you know what I mean? Like it's quite, it's almost unconsciously, because I am going back to therapy, it is unconsciously giving the signal to the other person in the relationship. I require you to remain in this frame. This is the only way I interact with you. And if you want me to stick around, it's best you stay here and like act like this and be like this. When you are willing to play with an other, you are giving them the signal that they can break free of all those, you know, constraints and normal ways of interaction, and that with the hope that you're still there for them. You actually want them to do that. It is a way of recognizing and kindling and supporting the other as well to continue to grow and change. You know, you don't have to just stay as, you know, my best friend Jane, like, you know, at age 15. Like you don't have to, like, you know, the you know, so it does go back to all the other themes we were talking about, and the sense that part of what's going on at Voicecraft is we enter into it with a sort of an honoring an honoring that of everyone there, of the relationships, that allows or that is, sorry, shown through the supporting of play. Like there is a playfulness and through that, I guess through that, it is about tuning, crafting the voice, you know, ultimately over time. But there is the over time thing here. There's a patience component, which goes back to trust and faith and a willingness to invest, and like all these other things that we've also just talked about. It's taking the whole matter so seriously that it's not something that we're just going to meet once and it's done, that it is like ongoing, and that I am signing up to that with you and with this process and with this context, through trust and through faith, and through that everything will necessarily sort of grow and shift, and that is the whole point. And we do that through play, and play is actually a form of honoring what is possible, and not being limited by fear that wants you to be as tightly rationally in control of things as possible, and for things to just remain how you need them to remain and how your little rational brain can make sense of right now, versus an opening up to wonder. And yes, in terms of Voicecraft and your contribution there, your experience with Voicecraft, is there anything that seems alive for you and that you would want to share if the person listening is someone who is entering that context for the first time, or they're relatively new, or they're not sure if they want to? I mean, is there anything that comes to your mind that we haven't spoken about that comes from your experience of interacting with Voicecraft?
I think there is definitely an increasing and gaining sense that what Voicecraft does is important, as opposed to just a kind of sense. Like there's more conviction actually increasingly in it. Now, all the liminal web spaces are dealing with economic sustainability and questions like that, but the conviction of the legitimacy, the importance of it is only growing. And it certainly is for me. And that there's increasingly a conviction in the positive sense of a conviction that Voicecraft is indeed some sort of art that is necessary for humanity and engaging in relationships, especially diverse relationships, especially ones that are going to be engaging with the tritone that seems so necessary today in the world. So I think there's an increasing conviction of that. I would definitely say that for anyone listening to this, wondering if they should join into Voicecraft, if you, I think there's a feeling that maybe not everyone, I like to think everyone, but lots of people had, where one day they were maybe walking, maybe they walked by an alley, maybe they were sitting somewhere, they saw a tree, and there was a sense, just a kind of like the breeze, that there's some sort of mystery to life, some sort of capital M mystery that's very alive, and there's some sort of vibrancy behind everything, and then it's gone. Maybe, you know, and they just sense it. Maybe you see something, you heard something, and there was a sense of a mystery, and then it's gone. Some have called it the sacred romance. Some have called it the Holy Spirit. Some have called it beauty. Take it what you will. But if you have a sense that there's something evanescent and yet more real in it, precisely because it is evanescent, Very often we associate evanescence with less real, but these experiences that we are describing are the experiences where you realize that there's something evanescent that's more real, and yet it's very difficult to know how to find it. If you knew how to find it, it wouldn't be evanescent, right? But there is a sense, just like the artist who engages in training or conditioning. I think Picasso said that indeed, inspiration is outside of your control. It tends to come to me at my desk, though, every morning at the same time. In the sense of inspiration is something you don't control, but you can work to create the conditions of the increased frequency of its occurrence. Right. I think this sacred romance is quite similar. I think it is something that you can work at the conditions to increase the regularity by which you experience it. And Voicecraft is a place to work and create those conditions because I think they actually are tied into the arts of voice. I think the voice is somehow humanly connected to that sacred romance. It is some sort of channeling of it. It is some sort of connection to it. Why not? It's hard to say, but if you do it, you sense it. And if you do it, you experience it. And so for those who have had a sense of the sacred romance, I would encourage you to try Voicecraft because it is the art form by which is crafting the voice to better speak that romance and to sing its praises.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a lovely place to wrap up. Thank you, Daniel. This has been lovely, and I've tried to keep the focus as much as possible on, coming back to finding out more about the person of Daniel. I don't know how successful I was. But I must say, actually, no, I think I was because I think we were because I'm leaving this now feeling that I know a lot more about you as a person. I have much more of a sense of some of the ways that now I can understand a little better is what I'm trying to say about why you're so good at all of this, like why it is, and I really respect that, and I really appreciate you opening up in this way and taking a gamble here to play on some kind of God knows what we're making here, something.
Well, Aspasia, it's been a treat. Thank you. Appreciate it. Best to you.
Soon. All right.
See you soon. All the best.